Awesome. Thank you so much, Marissa. So for those of you who I haven't met yet, as Marissa shared, my name is Katrina Luco, and I'm the training specialist here at Donate Life Northwest. I work primarily in the Erase the Wait program, which is our Living Kidney Mentorship program. However, my academic background is rooted in psychology and professional mental health, which makes me particularly passionate about bringing you this webinar series. So we do have a lot to cover today, so without further ado, let's get started by taking a look at today's learning objectives. In today's webinar, we will clearly define the need for control as a psychological construct. We'll learn how to identify real, in other words, controllable, versus hypothetical, in other words, uncontrollable problems. We will explore ways to let go of things we cannot control. We'll gain the ability to refocus our attention towards things that we can control, and we'll gain access to some tools to help us explore our need for control and foster letting go. We'll begin by discussing the heightened importance of letting go of control within the specific context of the current COVID-19 pandemic. So why is letting go of control important right now? In the first webinar in this series, I explained how the COVID-19 outbreak encompasses three of the primary triggers for stress, worry, and anxiety, being that the situation is ambiguous, novel and new, and unpredictable. So while letting go of control is always an essential element of overall happiness and well-being, it becomes imperative during times of heightened stress, worry, and/or anxiety, like we are collectively experiencing right now. Unclear, unprecedented, and unpredictable situations, such as the current health crisis, make us feel as though we lack control over our own well-being. Despite our best efforts, we have no way of ensuring that we will not become ill. Our actions can also not guarantee that all of our loved ones will remain safe. The more we focus on the elements of our current reality that are out of our control, the more emotional discomfort, stress, worry, and anxiety arises. The brutal truth of human existence is that we're never in control. Although we are currently hyper-aware of the lack of control that COVID-19 has imposed upon us, even in the pre-coronavirus world, we faced uncontrollable dangers on a daily basis. So now that we know letting go of control is more important than ever, let's take a look at what control is all about. I skipped over that slide, but we already talked about it. So before we dive deeper into the challenging realm of loosening our grip on control, it's important to understand why we have such a tenacious need for control in the first place. So what is control? Let's just begin by defining control as a psychological construct. As it relates to our brain, mind, and behaviors, control can be defined as exerting influence over one's environment or the actions or behaviors of another person. The desire for a sense of control over one's life is a profound and normal human need. In fact, some experts argue that it is a psychological and biological necessity. The need for control can be focused on internal states, such as maintaining emotional control or exerting self-control. It can also be focused externally in nature, seeking to control outcomes, other people, or aspects of our environment. Our need for control comes into play when we are making significant, complex, and emotionally charged life decisions, such as deciding which university to attend. It also influences basic behaviors in which we engage multiple times each day, such as how we interact with our coworkers. While natural, our need for control can become disruptive. When we constantly desire control, it becomes overwhelming and exhausting and often wreaks havoc on our health, relationships, careers, and overall sense of happiness and well-being. So where does a disruptive need for control originate? Unsurprisingly, a magnified need for control is typically a fear-based drive. A number of factors may make us more fearful of losing control, so let's take a look at some of those factors in detail. The first is childhood trauma. The environment in which we were raised and the life experiences we had there may contribute to an intensified need for control. As explained on the Good Therapy website, people who struggle with the need to be in control often fear being at the mercy of others, and this fear may stem from traumatic events that left them feeling helpless and vulnerable. Experiencing childhood trauma such as neglect, abuse, food insecurity, serious illness, or poverty may lead to a higher need for control as an adult. Being raised in a chaotic environment in which we have no sense of control often results in overly controlling behaviors and mindsets once we are given the autonomy of adulthood. As summarized by clinical social worker Dr. Stephen J. Betchen, during childhood, traumatized individuals may have learned to defend against their overwhelming trauma-related anxiety by attempting to control as much of their environment as possible. In other words, exercising control becomes a maladaptive coping mechanism that persists long after the transition from child to adult. As a result, we may crave control in disproportionate and unhealthy ways. The influence of traumatic experiences on the need for control is not limited to childhood trauma. Those of us who navigate traumatic experiences in adulthood may also be more apt to feel we need to control our lives in whatever ways possible. Adult traumas such as domestic violence, sexual assault, loss of a loved one, especially a sudden loss, natural disasters, miscarriage, or terminal illness leave us feeling helpless and vulnerable. As a result, we may look for ways to regain a sense of control over our lives in excessive and disruptive ways. Dr. Betchen explains that within the realm of mental health, anxiety is widely considered to be the underlying common denominator of a strong need to exert control. Having worked as a mental health professional myself, I can say that the relationship between anxiety and the need for control provides a classic example of the snake eating its own tail metaphor. The experience is cyclic. The need for control creates anxiety because inevitably there are always aspects of our lives beyond our control. The discomfort of anxiety then triggers a more intense need for control in a vain attempt to alleviate the anxiety that was produced by ill-fated attempts at control in the first place. And so around and around we go. In my clinical work, this cycle has been observable in every client I've worked with who struggles with anxiety. Trusting others inherently requires giving up control. We must take a leap of faith and assume that the individual, group, organization, or system we give our trust to has our best interests at heart. In other words, extending trust makes us emotionally vulnerable. When we find our trust betrayed after engaging in such vulnerability, our overall need for control may increase as a self-protective response. As further explained by the website Changing Minds, there is a paradox of control and trust. Trust leads to ceding of control, yet wielding of that control can lead to the loss of trust and ultimately control. When others who we have trusted betray the trust we have placed in them, it destroys our sense of control and hence our trust. A typical response to betrayal is to grab back control in order to protect oneself. Additional factors that may contribute to a high need for control include fear of abandonment, low or damaged self-esteem and or self-worth, individual beliefs, values, or faith, perfectionism and fear of failure, and fear of experiencing painful emotions. As you can see, most of these additional factors may be intricately intertwined with the causal variables we already discussed. So why is the need for control a bad thing? On the surface, controlling our lives sounds pretty great. If we can control the people and circumstances that affect us, we'll be happier and less stressed out, right? The problem with this approach is, whether we acknowledge them or not, there are myriad elements in our lives that are utterly out of our control. In other words, in trying to control everything, we are ultimately setting ourselves up for frustration and failure. So what are some of the negative impacts we experience when we get ourselves into a control-driven mindset? The first is emotional distress. Investing our physical, emotional, and mental energy in trying to control uncontrollable aspects of life causes stress, shame, worry, anxiety, depression, and panic. The harder we try to control the uncontrollable, the more our uneasiness grows. Focusing on things that we can't control and attempting to exert control over them actually makes it much more difficult to navigate life changes, particularly ones of the unanticipated variety. In other words, it makes us less resilient. A need for control is also detrimental to relationships. As explained by Dr. Betchen, the struggle for control can be more destructive to relationships than most people realize. Control struggles between partners are often the ruin of a couple. When one or both partners are battling for control, it can lead to frustration, apathy, distrust, resentment, conflict, aversion, and erosion. It is very important to note that the negative impacts of attempting relational control are not limited to romantic partnerships. A need for control is equally damaging to all of our relationships, whether with family, friends, or colleagues, and may drive a number of unhealthy relationship behaviors. An intense need to maintain rigid rules regarding things such as daily routine, diet, or cleanliness and order is also common amongst individuals with a high need for control. Such rigidity can easily become problematic and plays a prominent role in mental health issues such as obsessive-compulsive disorder and disordered eating. Let's take a look at a few more specific behavioral examples of how an excessive need for control may come up in the ways we interact with ourselves and others. When a high drive for control is present, we may observe the following behaviors regarding our exchanges with other people: failing to authentically listen or interrupting, micromanagement, restricting social activities or social interactions of others, dishonesty or emotional manipulation, overprotectiveness, or helicopter parenting. Attempts at controlling ourselves or our environment can contribute to unhealthy self-directed behaviors such as disordered eating, compulsive exercising, self-harm such as cutting, burning, or hitting oneself, substance abuse, compulsive arranging, ordering, tidying, or cleaning. So now that we're aware of the potentially detrimental effects of allowing our need for control to control us, let's begin to examine ways that we can let go of control. Let's be honest that letting go of control isn't easy. There are a couple of basic psychological concepts that will help us cultivate a deeper understanding of control and place our feet on more solid starting ground. The first is locus of control, which refers to the extent to which people feel that they have control over the events that influence their lives. If you believe that you have control over what happens, then you have what psychologists refer to as an internal locus of control. If you believe that you have no control over what happens and that external variables are to blame, then you have what is known as an external locus of control. As further explained by renowned psychologist Dr. Philip Zimbardo, a locus of control orientation is a belief about whether the outcomes of our actions are contingent on what we do, an internal locus of control, or on events outside our personal control, an external locus of control. It is important to note that locus of control is a continuum. No one has a 100% external or internal locus of control. Instead, most people lie somewhere on the continuum between the two extremes. These are characteristics of people with dominant internal or external locus of control. Individuals with an internal locus of control are more likely to take responsibility for their actions. They tend to be less influenced by the opinions of other people. They usually have a strong sense of self-efficacy, which is the belief in your own abilities to deal with various situations, and they feel confident in the face of challenges. Conversely, individuals with an external locus of control tend to blame outside forces for their circumstances, often credit luck or chance for any successes they experience. They don't believe that they can change their situation through their own efforts, and they frequently feel hopeless or powerless in the face of difficult situations. When it comes to letting go of harmful control, placing focus on minimizing our external locus of control and bolstering our internal locus of control is key. A major component of initiating a shift from external to internal locus of control is to identify actions you can take that will have a direct impact on the outcome you desire. We'll focus on this aspect in much more detail shortly. Also, as a side note, in the follow-up email that I'll send after this webinar, I will include a handout containing questions to help you determine your current locus of control. The other concept I feel is helpful to explore when learning how to let go of excessive control is called the illusion of control. The illusion of control refers to the tendency for people to hold a perception that overestimates their ability to control events. In other words, we tend to believe that we have control over outcomes that are, in actuality, uncontrollable and outside of our sphere of influence. This phenomenon was first discovered in the 1970s by research psychologist Ellen Langer. Since then, illusion of control has been demonstrated to be present within a variety of experimental situations. For instance, research showed that people feel less likely to get into a car accident if they are driving rather than riding in the passenger seat. Experiments also reflected that individuals believe they are more likely to win the lottery if they select their own numbers versus allowing them to be randomly assigned. As summarized by psychologist Dr. Sandra Sanger, time and time again, research has repeatedly demonstrated that regardless of intelligence, knowledge, or reason, people often believe they have control over events in their lives, even when such control is impossible. If we combine together what we've learned about locus of control and the illusion of control, we are given the important insight that in order to let go of harmful control drives, we need to be able to shift our focus onto things that we can realistically influence through our own actions. So let's take a look at how we go about doing that. One of the first places to begin when it comes to determining what we can realistically influence is to determine if we're attempting to control a situation related to a real problem or a hypothetical worry. Real problem worries are about actual problems that are affecting you right now and require immediate action. For example, given the very real concern about the virus at the moment, there are helpful solutions which include regular hand washing, social distancing, and physical isolation if you have symptoms. Hypothetical problem worries are about things that do not currently exist, but which might happen in the future. They tend to lend themselves to worst-case scenario thinking, or what we in the mental health biz refer to as catastrophizing. For example, in relation to the COVID-19 crisis, hypothetical problem worries might involve imagining the worst-case scenario of all of your loved ones dying. In relation to letting go, we need to release these hypothetical problems and center our energy on real problems. A good place to start in regard to determining if a problem is real or hypothetical is to ask yourself, is this a problem I can do something about? In the follow-up email, I'll include a simple decision tree handout designed to help you determine if you're directing energy toward a real problem or a hypothetical worry. The next step in our letting go process is to identify what we can and can't control. After determining that our energy is focused on a real problem versus a hypothetical worry, we need to acknowledge that not all real problems are within our control. For instance, if we continue to use the current health crisis as an example of a real problem, we can't control how others are adhering to social distancing regulations, but we can control our own action in that regard. Let's take a deeper dive into things that we can and can't control. First, we'll look at general everyday life things that are out of our control. What people say, others' opinions, others' actions, traffic, what other people think, time, aging, what other people believe, bills, what others post online, other people's feelings, other people's time, the weather, whether others are negative or positive, and others' attitudes. Quite a hearty list, and that's just a few. Now, how about some aspects of our everyday life that are within our control? What you say, your opinion, your actions, how often you smile, your thoughts, expressing your needs, asking for help, completing your responsibilities, what you look at online, your self-care, who you spend time with, your boundaries, your words, whether you look for negatives or positives, and the kind of attitude you have. So again, a hearty list, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you remember that one of our change goals is to shift more toward a locus of internal control, you can see that the items on the things that are within our control list are all internally focused in nature, whereas the items on the things that are out of our control list are external in nature. Are you beginning to catch on to a theme here? One of the most frustrating things and triggering things about the COVID-19 crisis is that so much about the virus and the limitations on where we can go are out of our control. However, there are things that we can control, and focusing on those things can provide you with some comfort and decrease anxiety. Some of the things that you are able to control include your mind and body, with such things as keeping a healthy diet, exercising at home, getting enough sleep, not smoking or drinking alcohol excessively, taking care of your mental health, and maintaining self-care and personal hygiene. You're also able to control your immediate environment, your house, your bedroom, your closet, your kitchen. Now's a great time to clean and get organized. You can make responsible choices about when to leave the house and only go out if necessary. You can also limit the number of people you come in contact with and work from home if you're able to. Another aspect of the current situation that is under our control is what type of media and how much media we consume. You can choose to not overdo your news and information intake. You can make sure that you're getting your information from reliable sources like the CDC or WHO. And you can watch TV, movies, and videos that make you feel good. You can also choose how you prepare. You can keep 2 to 4 weeks of food and water on hand. Avoid overstocking on supplies that are in high demand so other people can have enough of the essentials too. And if you take medication, try to get refills and keep a month's supply at home if possible. And as we've already discussed, your own actions and how you adhere to the social distancing guidelines, to mask wearing suggestions, are being able to take control of how you protect yourself and how you protect the others that you come in contact with. Now that we know how to differentiate things that we can and can't control, let's explore how we engage in actually letting go of the things that are out of our control. I'm going to start by sharing 2 very simple yet effective exercises and then move into more complex approaches. The first easy exercise is to simply write or draw the uncontrollable things that you want to let go of. In the follow-up email, I will include this Let It Go balloon worksheet that you're seeing on the screen. It can be helpful to use as it incorporates imagery as well as writing. The next simple exercise is designated to help you parse out what you can and can't control with the goal of then refocusing your energy on the controllable things. Draw a large circle on a piece of paper with a smaller circle inside. In the large circle, list things you cannot control. In the small circle, list things that you can control. In the follow-up email, I will include this version of the circles of control that we're looking at so that you don't have to make your own. Now we'll go into the more complex ways of working on letting go of control. The first is embracing the art of surrender. Letting go of the things we're unable to control can also be seen as surrendering. Surrender literally means to stop fighting. Stop fighting with yourself. Stop fighting the universe and the natural flow of things. Stop resisting and pushing against reality. Stop trying to control. Surrender is complete acceptance of what is. It's not about inaction. It's about taking action from a place of that surrender energy. Once you surrender to the things you can't control, you can redirect that energy to things that you can control, things that don't require a battle to pursue. Visualization can also be a helpful tool in facilitating surrender. When you notice you're in control mode and you want to let go, consciously and deliberately shifting into surrender energy, try the following. Imagine that you're in a small boat paddling upstream against the current. It's hard. It's a fight. It's representative of control mode. Now visualize the boat turning around. Envision yourself dropping the oars and gently floating downstream. You're being gently pulled with no effort necessary on your part. This is representative of surrender mode. Breathing deeply into your belly, say, let go of the oars. Another approach is to engage in an honest and open internal dialogue. This can be a useful tool in the letting go process. Try asking yourself the following questions. What am I afraid will happen if I let go of control? Is my fear realistic? Am I trying to control something I'm unable to directly influence? Would letting go feel like freedom? Your responses to these questions can be extremely helpful in activating the perceptual shifts needed to let go. If having an internal dialogue along these lines feels uncomfortable or you find it challenging to stay focused, try writing your responses to these questions instead. Next up is good old-fashioned grounding. When in a control mindset, you're living in the future. You are already attaching yourself to expectations and setting yourself up for disappointment. Focus on grounding yourself instead, also known as being present in the moment. Maybe this means taking a walk in nature, calling a friend, engaging in a favorite hobby, snuggling with a pet, or simply taking 5 minutes to focus on your breathing. Another important aspect of letting go is to allow yourself to feel negative emotions. In these currently uncertain times, it's natural to feel so-called negative emotions such as fear, anger, resentment, loneliness, frustration, depression, anxiety, grief, or annoyance. Name, acknowledge, and validate these emotions. It's okay to feel however you feel. Let yourself feel the feel and then gently give yourself permission to release it. The next approach to letting go of control is to release control of the outcome. Professor and psychotherapist William Barry explains, the second noble truth of Buddhism states desire is the root of all suffering. It means when one wants things to be different than they are, when one attaches themselves to good feelings and attempts to avoid negative feelings, when one attempts to control life to exclude everything they do not like, then suffering occurs. In alignment with this idea, the way to happiness is through non-attachment, letting go of expectations or the way we feel things should be when we are in a control mindset, and instead being in the present, not making judgments, and simply accepting life as it presents itself. It's a tall order. Striving toward letting go by simply reminding yourself occasionally that the present is what it is, that everything doesn't have to conform to your desires, to live and let live. These focuses will contribute to more happiness. Another approach is to remember the old cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It can be a helpful motivator in letting go of things you cannot control. Try thinking of challenges you've overcome in the past. At the time, they were likely incredibly overwhelming. However, you can look back objectively now and realize that the experiences were valuable to you. Life challenges almost always provide us with the opportunity for self-growth. That is, when we let go of trying to control the situation at hand. When we embrace life challenges instead of fighting to control them, we have the opportunity to acquire new skills or gain wisdom and new understanding. Even negative life experiences help us become better people if we let them. Inevitably, there will be times when no matter how diligently we try, we're simply unable to relinquish our need for control. Since striving for control invites higher levels of worry into our lives, at such times, a more behaviorally rooted approach can be helpful, such as scheduling worry time, also known as worry postponement. Experiment with postponing your worries. Deliberately setting aside some time in your day to do nothing but worry and limiting the time that you spend worrying outside of that designated period. To try worry postponement, do the following. Set aside a specific time every day for the purpose of worrying. Decide when your worry time will be and set a specific duration. When scheduling your worry time, consider the following. What time of day do you think you will be in the best frame of mind to attend to your worries? When are you unlikely to be disturbed? If you're unsure, 15 to 30 minutes every day at 7 p.m. is often a good starting point. During the day, decide whether worries that surface are real problem worries that you can act on now, or whether they are hypothetical worries that need to be postponed. Ask yourself, is this a real problem worry that I can do something about right now? If your answer is yes, move into action immediately. If your response is no, postpone thinking about it until your designated worry time. Use your dedicated worry time for worrying. Consider writing down any of the hypothetical worries that you remember having had throughout the day. How concerning to you are they now? Are any of them the kinds of worries that can lead you to take practical action? I will include a handout in the follow-up email that outlines these steps of worry postponement. So at this point, you may be thinking that letting go of control sounds like a lot of hard work. I won't sugarcoat things. It is. However, the payoff for your hard work will be big. So let's take a look at some of them. The first benefit of letting go of control is flexibility. A crucial element of mental health is the ability to be flexible. We must be able to exert flexibility in relation to our behaviors, thinking patterns, and emotions. We also need to be flexible in order to take part in perspective taking, an essential element of self-growth, problem solving, and maintaining healthy relationships. When we are viewing the world around us through the lens of control, we relinquish flexibility and unnecessarily stifle our ability to fully engage with and enjoy life. Simply put, we will never be truly happy when we prioritize the need for control because we will never be able to control everything. Another benefit of letting go of control is fewer roadblocks and more possibilities. Although we often feel our lives will run best when we're in control, the reality is that things typically go much more smoothly when we allow them to happen instead of trying to make them happen. When we're able to loosen our grip on things we can't control and redirect our energies toward things we are actually able to influence, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, creativity, and alternative perspectives. These are possibilities and perspectives that weren't there when we attached ourselves to what we deemed as the right way or the right path. Oftentimes, the path we so desperately want to be on is not the most helpful or productive one. Another benefit of letting go of control is that the energy of surrender facilitates accomplishment. The energy of surrender accomplishes much more than the energy of control. In a controlled state, we tend to be narrowly focused, and in an active state of fight, flight, freeze, which lends itself to physical agitation, lack of concentration, and almost no present moment awareness. In surrender mode, we invite calm, inner peace, and connection with the here and now. We are also able to expand our vision and better see the bigger picture. Lastly, letting go of control is incredibly helpful for our overall well-being. When driven by a need for control, we tend to be meaner and more aggressive. Letting go of control means more joy, freedom, peace, connection, and support. So as we come into the home stretch here, I'd like to provide a gentle reminder to ask for help if you're experiencing disruptive and uncontrollable levels of trying to control. Some people that you can talk to include a counselor or therapist, your doctor, a spiritual leader, a crisis helpline, which there are many that are geared towards specific populations, such as adolescents, elders, individuals struggling with substance abuse, veterans, and so forth. You can also always feel free to reach out to us here at Donate Life Northwest. We are always more than happy to provide any support and guidance that we can to our community members. So before we move into the Q&A and discussion portion, I want to share a simple that concisely sums up everything we've discussed today. The quote comes from author and Buddhist practitioner Jack Kornfield. He reminds us, to let go does not mean to get rid of. To let go means to let be. When we let be with compassion, things come and go on their own. So at this point, I will go ahead and open things up for questions and discussion. As Marissa said, you can feel free to unmute yourself if you would like to verbally ask a question. We also do have the chat feature that she pointed out earlier, and you can feel free to type a question or comment. So any questions, comments out there? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as a no, but please keep in mind that if you do have a question or comment and you don't feel comfortable sharing it now, or if one pops into your mind later, you can certainly feel free to reach out to me directly via email. As I've mentioned throughout the presentation, I will send a follow-up email that will include a link to the recording of this session, as well as a number of handouts and resources that have been mentioned throughout the webinar. Also, don't forget that this webinar is the third in a four-part series. In the follow-up email, I will also include a link to the recording of the first two sessions. If you were unable to attend, I encourage you to listen to the recording. The final webinar in this series will take place at this same time, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific, 1 week from today on Thursday, May 28th. It will be focused on finding life balance, which is another essential component of overall happiness and well-being. And for those of you who have attended the full series, the final webinar is really aimed to bring together everything that we have learned so far and help us move forward in finding that balance in our life. I will include the registration link in the follow-up email. However, if you're eager to register right away, please visit donatelifenw.org/calendar. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Take care, be kind to yourself, and be well.